Okay, so in this AutoCAD tutorial we are going to look at producing our basic car shape so that we can virtually wind tunnel test it. You'll find in the shared area a little file called F1 template drawing, which is the basic car. When you load it up you're going to get something that looks like this. You'll notice that we've got a box, some wheels and a funny T-shaped box in there. What this big box here in a sort of pale blue colour represents is the area in which you are allowed to draw. If it goes outside that shape we're going to have a problem because it won't import in properly. So basically you can draw within this box shape here. The wheels represent exactly where the wheels are on the F1 car. Again, these can't be moved. And the little T-shaped box here is an area you've got to navigate round. In effect that represents air vents into the engine, and this height here represents where the guy would sit. So in essence you've got to make sure that whatever you draw goes over the wheels, not necessarily around them but over the wheels, and covers over this part here. Within the, anything else then is pretty much fair game. The front of the car is a slightly longer end, so this represents the front of the car here, this represents the back of the car there. So that gives you an overview of what you're drawing in. Sizes of the car, if you want to work in actual dimensions, are as follows. And if you ever forget what the size of the car is, a really useful command is the distance command, which you can get by just typing DIST. And that allows you to draw a distance between 2 points. So you can see that this block is 225 millimeters long for doing it to scale, and you can then also test the distance going this way, and you can see that it is 85 millimeters that way. And if you do a distance from here to here, you'll get the height in the Z, and you can see that's 50 millimeters. So we've got a block that's just over 200 millimeters long, 80 millimeters wide, and 50 millimeters tall. So that gives you an overview of the car shape itself. What I'll do in a minute is look at a strategy for drawing over the car body. You'll notice that there's already a series of layers in there for you. You've got the block layer, there's this little set of layer I've done, and some wheel layers. We're only going to be interested in exporting the block. So the first thing I would do is create a new layer, and you know the routine by now. New layer, I would call this layer something like setup block. So you've got a setup layer for yourself on which you're going to draw your car body shell, and it might be that I would change this to a different colour to the one I've already got, maybe something like yellow. Click tick, that's now current. So there we go, instead of a little setup block layer there, it's also now current, I can see it there. The other thing I want to make sure is that I'm right clicking on my object snaps, make sure that my midpoint, endpoints and nearest points are on. That's very important, do not forget that. Midpoint, endpoint, got a bit of centre, intersection, nearest point. So they're the most useful ones. Perpendicular can sometimes be useful as well. Make sure they're on, golden rule. Other thing to check by right clicking, so it's right click on object snap to bring up those. Right click on polar tracking, just want to make sure I've got my 45-degree line up. So that I'm snapping at 45 degrees. And that gives you the basic overview of the model that you've got. So if we're going to look at drawing a basic car, the first thing I'm going to do is go to my views, and I want to make sure I'm drawing in one of the views here. Now this pointing down is my top view, so I'm probably interested in the front view. So in my views here, I'm going to click onto front view. There we go, so I can now see I've got my front view there. I'm going to check that the Y and the X are in the right direction, and I'm also, just to be doubly sure, going to do U, C, S, and I'm going to make sure it's fitting the view. So I've got my Y and my X there, so I'm now drawing in this view here. Back to my home view, make sure I'm in my setup layers, and what I'm going to do is basically very simple lines. I'm going to do a setup about this. I'm going to draw a line along the base here, because we need that to be the base of my car. It's got to fit within this block. I'm going to bring it a little bit up here, just to give me a bit of a starting point, and then I'm going to start to think about how these lines might work. Now if I keep my object snaps on, you'll find that when I click a line it's going to start snapping to things. So if I click on this, press escape, it looks like it's drawn correctly. If I go into my isometric view, you'll see the lines are all over the shot, because as it's drawing it's clicking on random things. So often when you're drawing, it's not always good to just keep clicking where you think it's going. So we'll go back into my front view again. Let's erase these lines. Let's have better. So if our lines aren't going to work correctly, we need to have a bit of a strategy here. So the first thing I'm going to do is just start by drawing a line here, end point to end point. It's always a good idea to just check. So has that one drawn correctly? Yes, it has. Brilliant. Into my front view again. Another line. Let's try the end point of here to the end point of there. Quick check again, ISO. Yep, that's looking nice. It's in the right position. Back to my front view again. Right, rather than drawing a line here, because it's going to attach to this point and then be in the wrong kind of position, better thing to do is to actually go into your layers and just turn the block layer off, because we know where it's starting, it's here and here. So turn the block layer off, so I can't snap to that block layer by accident. And all I'm going to do is just do a little line, and I've got my nearest point on, so I'm snapping to the yellow line here. I know it's going to be right. Snapping there, and then I'm going to do another line, again here and here, and all I'm actually doing is just roughly working out where the shapes are going to be. So I know I've got my start here, I know I've got my end there, I know I've got a block in the middle. This means I can now happily draw without fear of it snapping to bits incorrectly. And I'm just going to start by drawing a simple wedge shape. So we can actually start to begin to use this to design. And if you want, you can even do things like turn polar off, so you've got a bit more control of the angle. And yeah, I'm going to bring it up to here, perpendicular to that. And then I need to draw a line from here, so I need to come across the top here. And I can even think about how that might look. So I'm just beginning to have a little bit of a think about how this shape might look. I can bring a line past here, and I'm obviously going to need to trim that down because it's going out of what will be my box. I'm just going to draw a line from here, draw a line from there just to end that up. Trim command, select what I'm trimming against. I'm trimming against this, press return, trim the bit off you don't need. So we can now see I've got the beginnings of an outline shape. Not looking particularly nice, but it doesn't matter because I'm going to use the arc tool now and just start to clean some of these lines up. So I've got a bit more of a curve. So I'm going to arc that up to perhaps here. End that there. And perhaps I'll use the arc tool again. So we use an arc from here to here, like that. And I've got my end there. If I want to, I can now delete some of these parts out here. So I'm just going to delete some of the lines I don't need. Zoom in to make it a bit easier. So we'll erase this line here, that line there, the line here, here and here. Get rid of those. It's looking a little bit neater. And if we look at erasing out the straight line here, the straight line here, I didn't want to do that, doesn't do that. What have we got? Erase this line here and that line there. There we go. So I've now got a smoother shape. Still not perfect, but it's smoother than it was. Let's use the trim command, and I want to trim these parts off here. So I start to get an outline that goes up and around there. So let's select that. I'm going to trim against that. Press return. I'm now going to get rid of that part and that part there. This bit here I think is still all one line. Just select that and see. Yes, it is. So I'm also going to trim this part of the line here. So just using my trim command again. This is what I want to trim against. Press return. I'm going to get rid of that. So I've got beginnings of my outline here. Now, hopefully, we'll be able to use the join command. If the join command doesn't work, I might draw a polyline around it. But let's join this, this shape here, that part there, that part there, this part here. That's going to be a problem, so I'm going to trim that back again. So, using my trim command, this is going to be my line I'm trimming against, and I'm going to get rid of this little part here. Let's try my join command again. Joining that, this, that part there, that part there, that part there, that part there. Press return, double check, have I got a single polyline? Yes, I have. So I can now extrude that shape out. If I go back into my isometric view, we can see my shape. We can see it's nearly right, except one of my lines has been drawn incorrectly here. Now this is a bit of a problem. What I'm going to wind up doing is changing my UCS to world. We can fix this, because basically I just want to go back to my home view, use the line command, attach the endpoint here, zoom in so I know I'm right, attach the endpoint there. But I will now have two shapes, no longer a polyline. So what I will need to do is go back into my join command, select that polyline and this line, and convert that into one shape, which is now done. Which means I should be able to extrude this correctly. So okay, now I've got my shape, we can extrude it. Now the width of the block is actually 85mm long. So if we go straight to my 3D tools, extrude it, select the item, and move it out in that direction. Obviously if I put in the value of 85, that now extrudes out to 85. If we go into my view, just give that a bit of a clean up, we can now see that nicely goes over the whole body, but it does look a little bit blocky. So we'll try and smarten that up. Back to my 2D wireframe view, and I'm going to go into the top view. So what I'd really like to do is chop some of the car out around the side here. So let's start by drawing some shapes. I'm going to just go back to my home view, and I might do a new layer here because I'm going to use this and create another setup layer. So we'll call this setup cutout, and we'll just make this, I don't know, blue will do. Make that current. And again, I'm just wanting to have a think about how I'm going to chop this out. So there's lots of little things I could do here. I could start by drawing a line from here, bringing it somewhere around here, back to here, back to here, because I can then use this to chop out that part there. So I'm not really measuring this, I'm actually using it to design. I'm just going to join these together. Now I've got a complete shape. I'm going to go into my 3D view just so I can see how this looks. There we are there. And I'm going to extrude it. 3D tools, extrude. I'm just going to select that shape and extrude it straight up. Now before I cut it away, what I really want to do is mirror it, so that I've got the same on the other side. And the mirror command's dead simple. You'll find it in the Home tab, Mirror. Select the object. You don't want to select anymore, press return. It's going to want to know where the mirror line is. Well, your mirror line's simple. It's the middle of your car. So make sure you've got a midpoint on any of these shapes. You can use pretty much anything that's useful. So we'll try using the midpoint here to the midpoint of there. Do I want to delete the original object? No, I don't. I'm just going to press return. Let's have a quick look in the top view, make sure that still looks okay. So to recap there, all I've done is select in the Home command, mirror, select the item, press return, and then find the axis line, which is always going to be the middle of here to there, or any of these points here, even the end of that line, the red line to the end of the red line there would work. So just find the middle point. I can now go into my 3D tools and subtract it, and really just start carving this away if you like. Subtract, remember, what do you want to subtract from? I want to subtract from that. Press return, what are you subtracting? This and this. Press return, that now ends that area off there. Let's have a look and see how that looks in my 3D view. And there we go, so I've already cut part of that off there. This top bit here, we could even reduce some of this down, couldn't we? So we can see we don't need all this extra width here. So if we go back into my top view, and again into the Home view, make sure we're on the right layer. Again, I'm not really going to concentrate on designing this. I'm just going to start by drawing the line. If I make it so that it comes past here, just put a radial lock on so it's at least straight here, and then start thinking about bringing it down here, I can actually draw shapes that I can then use to chop out. So I might bring this close to the wheel arch, so up to here, back to here, then back to here. So you can have a bit of a play and see how this works. Okay, so there's my shape. I'm going to use my usual trick, modify, join. So just select all the bits I want to join together. Join that all up. Check that I've got one polyline. Hopefully I have. Yes, I have. And we're going to extrude it. And again, I'm going to do this by just going into my 3D view. And UCS is still fine. So we'll do 3D tools and extrude. Grab it. I'm going to make this quite tall. Doesn't really matter too much. If I go into view and shade that into conceptual, you can see we've got my shape there. Now, if I cut this out from this shape, we'll have a bit of a problem, and I'll demonstrate what the problem is now. So if I go into conceptual, if I go into my 3D tools, do my subtract and say, there's the object, press return, now I want to subtract that from it, you see it subtracts far too much out, because it's going to subtract over the whole distance. What we really want to do is have it subtract parts of it out. So if I go into my view, into my front view, we can now see the problem, subtracting all of the car out there. The trick here is to go into wireframe, and we can now see that we want to move this at least up here. So if I do my usual move command, I could do this by doing 0, 0, 0 and guessing how far up I'm going to move it. But in this case, because I'm in the view, I'm just going to select it, press return, it'll ask me where the base point is, click somewhere near it. And providing you've got your radial lock on, you can actually now move it to roughly where you want. Beware though, if you've got an object snap, it will move it by the object snap, so sometimes it's best to turn your object snaps off and just move it in the direction where it goes. If I bring it up to here, we're now slightly above the car. Okay, back into my 3D view. Change my user coordinate system to world, zoom in, and we'll now have a look at how that sits. It looks okay. Into my 3D tools, subtract. Okay, is that giving me quite what I thought I wanted it to do? Well, it's not bad. It starts to carve out some shapes here. Perhaps it would be better if it was not quite dropping like that, because that is going to create an airflow problem. So we'll just undo that, go back into my side view, front view, sorry, and we can now see where we want this to work. So let's move this again, bring it up, and we can see if I bring it to here, it's going to chop across the top there and cut around the side, which will work better. So let's go back into my 3D view, and we can see it here. Change my UCS to world. Just check how this is going to look, so we can actually use this to design and model as we're going along. 3D tools, subtract. Take my object, subtract that from it. And that's looking a little bit better, but we could see actually if I wanted to, I could design this so it cut more out over there. So let's just undo and bring that back. Right, if I want to design it so it cuts more out, what I really need to do is take part of this off as well. So I'm going to go back into my front view again, change myself to wireframe, and what I want to do is create a curve that drops off this. So into the home view, new layer, I'm going to do another setup layer, setup block 3, give this a bright colour, something that I've not used before, we'll use a pink. Okay, make that current. What I'm actually now going to do is just start drawing some lines again, so we can see, and I'm going to make sure my object snaps are off for this, you'll see why in a minute. We can see it's going to fit nicely there. What I'd really like it to do is to drop down slightly and come up here. So what I'm actually going to do is move this object roughly back to where I would like it to go. So it just sits above this green line here. And now I'm going to draw some lines that allow me, I'm just going to roughly trace, to chop off the bits I don't want. So I want to try and draw a shape that chops out the bottom of this. Just take my radial lock, my polar off for this, and we'll just start drawing some lines here. So I'm going to chop off all of this part here, but I want it to drop down slightly lower and above the wheel here. So I start to get a bit of an arch effect. Bring it down below it, so I create a shape that goes below that. And at this point I can see where my starting line is, so I'm going to put my object snap back on, just so it joins that. And we'll just exit that there. So I've got part of my shape here. Now it's looking quite complicated, but you'll see what I'm going to do in a minute. I'm going to use the modify command, and I'm going to join these up. So I'm going to join this, 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 this. Zoom right in. This, this part here, this part here, zoom in again, that one there, and this one here. Would probably have been easier just to have turned some of these layers off so I could see it. So there is my shape. Press return, just check that's okay by selecting on it, and that looks like one object. Again, I'm going to go back to my 3D view, so we can see where it is. It's miles out from where I want it, but that doesn't matter because I'm going to chop it away. Changing my UCS back to world again, so it's all going the right way. 3D tools, I'm now going to extrude this, and I'm going to extrude it quite some way. So I know I've definitely gone through the blue block here. What I'm now going to do is do my subtract command. So from the blue bit, I'm now going to subtract the pink bit. And what this does is it cuts the bottom away of the blue bit. I could have shaped that off by doing arcs and making it smoother. But if I now go into my view, into my front view, you can see we've now got this shape here. Much more complex shape. Back into my isometric view, change my UCS again to world, so the grid's the correct way. And if I click on conceptual, I can see my shape. So I'm now going to go back to 3D tools. I'm going to subtract by clicking on this, pressing return, and subtracting that. That's a much nicer, smoother looking shape. Now I'm happy with that shape. I'm just going to undo that because what I really want to do is mirror it. MI command, mirror, there's my object. In this view I can't really see a great deal, so it's probably better to go into my top view, check my X, Y and Z are okay, and they are, and then I can go MI, mirror again, or you can access it from the home menu and click on mirror here, select the object, find the midpoint, there's one there. Make sure, you can see at the moment getting a straight line is really hard. That's because I haven't got my polar tracking on. I'm going to put that on, and now it snaps to the right position. Press return. Do I want to delete the original object? No, I don't. I've now got both parts there and they're correct. Into my 3D tools, subtract, click on the object, here it is here, take that side there, cut them away. If I now go back into my view, I've got a fairly rough looking car shape. Now I can smooth all of this off by just using the fillet command. And to do that, what I might do, I've still got some setup layers here. So what it might be quite useful to do is just go back to my home view, and you can see that we've got some setups and some blocks. I'm going to do a new layer, and I'm going to call this new layer body shell. And I'm going to give that a colour. We'll make it a really bright turquoise. Click tick. I want to now change this yellow body shell to the correct layer, and I can do that by just typing in CH. It's the change properties command, and it will bring up a little box. Now if I click on this object here, it finds it and tells me it's in setup block. Click on the arrow here, and I can now change this to body shell. There's my body shell layer. The reason I want to do this is because I'd quite like to turn off all of my setup layers that I had on, so that the next thing I do is going to be working only in this layer and it can't be confused by anything else. Here's where we can play with our 3D tools. We can actually use the fillet edge command here, and you can have a bit of fun with this, because let's smooth off some of these corners. Let's take that edge there. Selected the edge, into radius, let's make the radius bigger, let's try 10. That seems like it'll work. Press return once to see how it looks in preview, press it again, and that automatically smooths off that edge. If I've done 10 to this side, I need to make sure I go into the orbit view, spin it round, 3D tools, fillet edge, collect that bit. It remembers the last radius, so it's already set to 10. Press return again. And if I then go onto my orbit command again, I can spin this around slightly more, and here's where I can start playing around with more of these shapes so I can soften them up. So I might say, okay, let's fillet edge this part here, and this little line here. That smooths that off, and I can then start thinking about whether I smooth the front off here. So I go for my fillet edge again, select one here, maybe one there, maybe one there, one here, and perhaps one there, and let's just see how that works. We can now see we've started to smooth off my car, so we can start to gain quite a good, potentially aerodynamic shape. Be careful when you fillet these, because if you fillet them too much, as I can demonstrate, let's go to fillet edge. If I fillet edge this and say, okay, let's make this really, really 10mm smooth, press return. If you fillet it too much, this looks like it's probably going to be okay. If you fillet it too much, the orange box that you've got underneath could poke through. Let me demonstrate that, because if I make this radius bigger, fillet edge, so we're going to select this edge here, we'll select this edge here. Now you see in this case, when I filleted it 12, it's too much, and I can now see the green box showing there. Not difficult to fix, because we can actually use this to undo it, and then just go back into my fillet again. Okay, doesn't like a fillet of 12, let's try that again there. Into my radius, we'll try 10. 10 is too much. Undo that, and you can keep playing until you've got it right, really. Back into my radius value, let's just try a radius of 7. That just about works. We can now see that that works there. So, with a little bit of thinking and chopping, you can actually create some quite powerful aerodynamic shapes. If you wanted to, you could even draw a rear spoiler by going into your front view, drawing your spoiler shape and extruding it 85mm. That gives you a bit of a rough guide into how to set up and use Autocad to design your shapes. Have a go, see what you can come up with. Those of you who are feeling really adventurous can try using the loft command to create your car body shape.